Hello, General Biology, and welcome to screencast number 2 of Section 4.4, Chapter 4 series. And we were just getting ready to talk about biomes. So the way that we define biomes is to associate it with its seasonal patterns of temperature and precipitation. And we can put that into a graph like you see here. And I will tell you that you will see graphs like this on the test quiz or whatever assessment that we have for this section. So if we're taking a look at New Orleans, Louisiana, we can see in degrees Celsius over here what the average temperature is. And remember, 0 degrees Celsius is freezing. 100 degrees Celsius is boiling. I told you that 23 degrees Celsius is about room temperature, and 37 degrees Celsius is like body temperature, 98.6. Okay, to give you an idea. We see over here on this side is the average precipitation, and it's done in millimeters. So just in case you don't remember, millimeters are the tiny little lines. The centimeters are the bigger lines, so every 10 tiny little lines would make 1 centimeter. Okay, so these are the millimeter lines, so it goes up to 400 millimeters. And then we look at our months. So what this tells you is when we look at the blue, this is the average amount of precipitation, and you can see that July is the rainiest month of the year for Louisiana, New Orleans. And then the red line also goes with the temperature, so it also kind of shows you that during March, April, well, I'll say May, okay. Now, well, it's pretty even here. So yeah, during May it starts to go up temperature-wise. June, July, it's warm. August, it's warm. September, it's warm. And then the temperatures start to go down October, November, December for the temperature range. So this is what is known as a climate diagram. And as I just explained, it shows that average temperature and precipitation at whatever location you happen to pick. And on this climate diagram, we also have temperature that we said is plotted by that red line, and the vertical lines are going to show the precipitation. So this is one of the things that we would use in order to define that biome that we're looking at. So when we think about what kind of organisms live in this particular area, they're going to be the ones that are adapted to live successfully in whatever environment, whatever biome that we find them in. Even if we have a defined biome, we'll see that there is a considerable amount of variation among the plant and animal communities that live within that range, that area. So if we're talking about the tundra, we're going to have caribou that live in the tundra, where if we're looking at the boreal forest, we're probably going to see more moose, and maybe some elk might be within that particular area. So there's a little bit more variation. These variations happen because of their exposure, elevation, local soil conditions, local weather conditions for that particular area. And also we know that the changes happen because the organisms or the conditions of that environment can also change over time, and human activity has a lot to do with that as well. Okay, so let's take a look at our first biome, and that's the tropical rainforest. So they are home to more species than any other biomes combined. They are the most diverse area for organisms, plants and animals. Rainforests don't get a lot of rain throughout the year. They only get about 2 meters. So if you're not familiar with 2 meters, 39 inches is 1 meter. So we were just going to double that and say 78 meters, or 78 inches actually, would be the amount of rain that they would get in a year. So that's quite a lot of rain that they get, and because of that they wind up having very poor nutrient soils, because a lot of time, with all that rain, the nutrients are going to get washed away. They also don't get a lot of leaf fall from their vegetation. And like in our area where we have deciduous trees, and our trees lose the leaves every season, or every fall, and then they gain them back in the spring. What happens is when they decompose, they add nutrients to the soil. So in rainforest, you don't get that leaf droppage, not as much as you would get in our area, and that's one of the reasons why the soil is so poor and the rain washes it away. Take a look at the temperature. The temperature is fairly consistent. Remember, I said to you 22 degrees, 23 degrees Celsius is about 72 degrees, and we know that 37 degrees Celsius is 98.6. So it's safe to say that this is about 80 degrees, 85 degrees, and it stays really steady. During May, June, July, August, September, October, November, the rainfall decreases. But during the winter months like December through April, that's where you're going to get most of the rainfall during that time. So the trees, when we talk about the trees are really tall trees. They're very dense. They've got a lot of leaf that forms a covering that we call the canopy. So the canopy can be about 40 to 80 meters above the forest floor, and let me tell you, that's high. And the reason I know this is because I zip-lined 342 feet above those treetops when we went to Costa Rica with some of the students, not this past summer, but the summer before last. And the trees are really, really tall trees. They're not the tallest trees in the world, but they're tall, and to be that much higher over the trees, it was really scary. But because they have a leafy covering, this prevents sunlight from being able to get down to the forest floor. So it offers a lot of shade, and because of that, there's not a lot of foliage underneath. There is shade-tolerant plants that will grow there, but they tend to be more in vines, and they form what is called the understory because it's underneath that canopy. So organic matter on the forest floor is recycled, and it is reused so quickly, as I said, that the soil is just not very rich in nutrients or minerals. And as I said, there's not a lot of dropping of the leaves where it would put the nutrients back into that soil. The types of abiotic factors that exist within the tropical rainforest are that they are hot and wet year-round, that they do have thin, nutrient-poor soils, and because it's thin, when it does rain, it's subject to erosion. One of the other things that we did when we were in Costa Rica is we were at Monteverde cloud forest, and we helped repair some of the trails because of the wet erosion that takes place. So now when we try to consider the biotic factors, one of the major things that we're going to talk about is the plant life that's there. So understory plants, those that are under that canopy, are going to be competing for sunlight. So most of them are going to have really, really large leaves that will be able to maximize and capture that limited sunlight. And again, drawing on my experience when we were in Costa Rica, they actually have these huge leaves on some of the plants. They're called umbrella plants, a Poorman's umbrella, because when it rains they would actually pick those and hold them up over their heads because it would act as an umbrella. They're so big. And the leaves are broadleaf, very, very broadleaf leaves, because they need to be able to capture as much sunlight as they can. Some of the plants will even have symbiotic relationships with the trees. So rather than growing on the ground, they actually grow on the branches. They're called bromeliads. So we wind up getting tall trees that grow in poor, shallow soil. They have something called buttress roots for support. And buttress roots are roots that are above the ground. So there's a ficus tree, and the ficus tree will grow like this towards the sun, and it will literally drop a root down like that. So as it continues to grow up to the sun, it'll drop another root down like this, and these roots will look as thick as the trunk of the tree. And as it continues to work up towards the sun, another trunk will come down like this, another root will come down. And this is what is known as buttress roots, and they help support that plant. And as I said, they're going to grow towards that sunlight. They have, I called them bromeliads. They're actually epiphytic plants, and they grow on the branches of tall plants rather than in the soil. And the epiphyte, epi means above, phyte tells you that it's a plant. They take advantage of the available sunlight that they're able to get being at the tops of the branches of these trees, and they obtain their nutrients through the host. So it doesn't hurt the tree at all, but it's that symbiotic relationship. It's not mutualism because it doesn't benefit, but it's more like a commensalism that happens with that. So when we think about animals, as far as the biotic factors, these are animals that are going to be active all year long. Some of them have very bright colors, like the toucan, which is a bird that has the yellow and some red and some white and some black that is on it. We actually saw, and I don't know the name of it, but we saw a turquoise colored bird that was absolutely gorgeous. And then there's other animals that are very camouflaged. When we saw the iguanas, they were kind of brown, and they blended in with the bark or the trunks of the trees. And we saw a basilisk lizard, which was bright green. It was an emerald basilisk, and it was the same color as the green plants, so it was hard to see. And this is one way that they protect themselves against predators. Some can even change colors to match their surroundings. So some of the lizards that were there can blend right in. So there are animals that actually live up within the canopy, and they are adapted for climbing, jumping, and flight. I have to share this story with you. We were at a kind of like a hotel resort area that has kind of a science piece to it when we were traveling in Costa Rica, and it was called the Sarapiqui Rainforest Lodge that we were staying in. And they really don't have doors in like they were thatch roofed huts. And you know what? I'm gonna stop here. I'll tell you about this. I just looked at the time. We'll stop here and I'll tell you about that story. So hold on. Hopefully you'll be interested enough to catch me in the next screencast.